Hey, folks, it's your Friday rundown for January 26, 2024. Obviously, Zach Osterman, Insider, Indianapolis Star. Going to keep it a little more brief today. Not a ton, I guess, going on. On the men's side, obviously, Hoosiers are at Illinois tomorrow, Saturday, the 27th. You know, people have asked me, is this a must-win for Indiana? I would say it is at very least a must-perform is kind of, I guess, the line I've settled on. I think Indiana needs to play well against a good team. I think for its own sake, it needs to see itself playing well in a moment like that against a team like that. It needs to have that sort of that lived experience. And it just needs to feel like it's kind of putting the pieces back into place after obviously a couple tough losses. And frankly, you know, they've lost 4 of 6 since Big Ten play resumed. So it's not just Purdue and Wisconsin. It's kind of against the backdrop of really struggling once Big Ten play kind of kicks back into gear. No firm word on kel'el Ware's status. Mike Woodson said Thursday he'd need to see him at practice Thursday. You know, it's kind of hard to gaze into the crystal ball in this one. You know, honestly, if he's in a walking boot on a Friday, you know, with an ankle injury, you know, for that to have cleared up in a week and a day is, I don't want to say impossible. I think it's probably uncommon. I also think it's interesting because Woodson has talked about this matchup with Illinois. Illinois plays small. They make you play small. And I don't think Indiana's in a position where it could maybe force Illinois to play big, if you understand what I'm saying. I think Indiana's kind of going to have to do that with Illinois. I just think in the modern game, you know, when one team sort of wants to impose bigger lineups on another team, typically the team that's a little smaller, a little bit quicker, more athletic, tends to have more success. Not always. And I'm not saying Indiana wouldn't be better for kel'el Ware obviously playing on Saturday at Illinois. I just think that this may, you know, kind of quietly be a game where Indiana needs to sort of go a little smaller on the floor anyway, no matter who's available. But my guess is we won't know. And Indiana may not have a final sort of call on Ware until Saturday. They'll have traveled to Champaign today. But it's a big game for Indiana. And more than that, I think it's kind of it's a big stretch because Indiana's got 2 home games after this one, and then they go to Ohio State and Purdue. And at some point, Indiana, in this span of 6 or 7 games, Indiana's got to prove that it can compete with and beat the kinds of teams it needs to build an NCAA tournament resume. Because right now, it you know, not only does Indiana not have those wins, it hasn't really looked like it's capable of getting them. You've had a week and a day off to do any necessary soul searching and have any of those kinds of conversations. If you're Indiana, you just kind of need to, you know, you need to be able to put that together now. You know, if it does feel a little bit like an if not now, win sort of situation. The women play Northwestern next. I believe that's in Bloomington. I will double check that as we're talking. It's kind of an interesting run for Indiana's women as well. They're tied with Iowa atop the Big Ten standings. And, you know, everyone has kind of got that February, February 22nd game against Iowa kind of, you know, on the horizon. But Indiana's got a trip to Maryland next week. They host Ohio State, which is only a half game back in the Big Ten standings. IU, Ohio State, and Iowa all have 1 loss on the women's side. Nobody else has fewer than 3. So those 3 teams have kind of separated themselves. Indiana doesn't get Ohio State at home this season, but it does go to Ohio State next Sunday, February 4th. Michigan State at home, the return trip from Purdue, so a rivalry game at home. The point is there's some hurdles Indiana's got to clear here if Indiana wants to still be in a really good moment when it plays Iowa. And I know why everyone kind of gets focused on Caitlin Clark and all that, but I think that, you know, from Terry Morin's perspective, I think she is going to be firmly in sort of 1 game at a time mode here, making sure, number one, that Indiana stays clean at home. Where they have been, you know, really difficult to even play with at times this season, much less beat, obviously. And then Indiana's got, again, a couple tricky, you know, the Maryland road trip could get sticky. Maryland's a good team that's lost some close games this season. Ohio State just beat Iowa. Again, Buckeyes are firmly in the Big Ten race. And Indiana itself is coming off a bye week. They will play Sunday against Northwestern. They haven't played since last Sunday at Purdue. Sydney Parrish is out indefinitely. Terry Morin told reporters that on Friday. So, you know, that's with her injury. That's kind of probably going to be one of the lingering storylines for Indiana because losing a player of that impact, is going to affect how you attack at both ends of the floor. It's going to affect your depth, your rotations, all those different things. But, IU's women just kind of, I think at this point are very much just in, one game at a time. They look very much like one of those teams that should be in and around the Big Ten title conversation come late February and March. But they're only going to do that if they do just kind of, eat this thing one bite at a time. And that's what they've really looked capable of so far. The Iowa loss, obviously, in Iowa City notwithstanding. So one last note, and again, I said we were going to keep this a little bit shorter today. Kurt Signetti announced, I guess this would have been Thursday night, I believe, that Indiana's spring game will be Thursday, April 18th, which is the Thursday before Little Five. Little Five is on the 19th and the 20th this year. It's an 8 p.m., so it's under the lights. It's the first time I can remember Indiana doing an under the lights spring game since maybe Tom Allen's first spring in 2017. I want to say that was a night affair. I think it's interesting because Signetti seemed to embrace on Twitter the idea of sort of pinning this game into the Little Five calendar. And I think coaches, this is a small thing, and obviously I'll always be a little bit biased given my personal affiliation with the race. But it has always struck me that a football coach's sort of how quickly a new football coach kind of comes to terms with, the campus culture around Little Five versus their spring season and their spring game is often reflective of just how comfortable they get in the job kind of in the early days and the early weeks. And for Signetti to already kind of be embracing the idea that the culmination of his spring season can also be, part of the wider calendar of this, obviously what is a really, really big week on IU's spring calendar as a university, as a community. I think there's, something subtle but important in that. And I think that there's, I think that's meaningful in a way. So just wanted to put, again, kind of a date to push a pin in the calendar for April 18th, Thursday night, 8 p.m., Indiana spring game at Memorial Stadium. We'll leave it there for now. Obviously, we'll have insider content from Champaign tomorrow. We'll make the drive over. And we will be spinning forward into Indiana's 2-game homestand after that. We'll have a lot of women's basketball coverage. Mike Meislick's on top of that. Zion's on top of that. Chloe Peterson always does a great job with that. So just stay tuned to indystar.com/sports, and we'll take care of everything you need. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.